discovered my sound by listening to a lot of my friends that made noise and kind of saying that I wanted kind of a dancier element mixed with like almost like an industrial club sound. Kind of a overall like setup of my gear is I've got everything inside some Pelican 1510 cases. Inside that Pelican 1510, I have a Harbinger mixer I got from Guitar Center, as well as a Rat clone. So the Rat clone I use is a vocal preamp. It's a Black Rat. I don't even know the manufacturer. But from there I go into an Electro-Faustus Fugue State, which is a nice 2-oscillator synthesizer. It's really nice because it's designed for guitar, and so you end up being able to cut it or kind of mix in your signal almost like you would a guitar signal. So super handy, super helpful. I then have a Dreadbox Karimbe, which is genuinely one of the best flangers I've ever used. It gets really slow, it gets really nasty. You can feed it into like your standard semi-modular rig. It takes full CV, takes sync. Really cool device. So I use that for vocals and synth processing. And then I have a Roland D4. It's really just like a Swiss Army knife. I really like that the Roland D4 allows me to do pitch, formant, scatter, reverb, but also like has a fully fledged looper. It can take in MIDI sync over USB-C, which is really handy because you can do power, sync, and MIDI over it. I also have a Arturia key step. It's just the standard smaller model, but it's really nice because you can also kind of like the Roland do all of your MIDI, all of your power, all of your sync over micro USB. And so it's a really versatile kind of a Swiss Army knife of a tool. So all of that kind of goes into my laptop. It's just an ThinkPad X270. And I've got it just running Windows 10, running Reaper, which is, in my opinion, one of the best free DAWs out there. It's not necessarily free, like they ask you pay for it, but it has pretty much an unlimited trial, kind of like WinRAR. Really, really great laptop, really great software package. From there, I run about 16 instances of DexEd, which is like a DX7 emulator. I also use a plugin called Fuzz Plus 3 to add a little bit more grit and dirt on top. It's like a hard limiting distortion. From there, I use MT Power Drum. So I use MT Power Drum as like my main like drum synth. So I use that for like clean drums. And there's a really good VST called Tattoo. It's been out of production for a couple of years. It's freeware these days, but really good 909 simulator. So I get a lot of those really deep basses. I get a lot of those claps that I want. I get a lot of that really dirty snare. Sounds really good. And then I just use a lot of just the built-in plugins in Reaper to process like samples, to process like if I play my bass and play it over a track. I typically use a Kramer Duke. It's an 84 with flat wounds, has an aluminum neck, very, very hot pickups. And then I feed that through like one of the big muff reissues, one of the Green Russians, as well as a 90s Sans amp bass preamp. So it really adds that just DI tone that I don't need to have an amp with me. I can just plug straight into XLR and have it go. A big part of like what makes these hard cases like a really nice rig, I've got all my power, I've got all of my USB hubs, I've got all my MIDI hubs. I have an external MIDI hub, it's Quadra Through by MIDI Solutions, great box. Runs without any power, it just is great. And so I use that to like control an external drum machine. I'm not doing that today, but I love my Drum Brute Impact, one of the best analog drum machines I've ever used. It can do everything from like classic kind of Kraftwerk stuff all the way to like Nasenbluten style like Gabber. It has built-in distortion, it has a really good circuit, it has individual outs, and you can do sync and gate out of it too. So it can be really integrated to even like a full modular rig, which is really helpful and useful. Also, custom gear, I threw a bunch of piezo microphones into a collar. And so I have that around my neck during my set, and it has 3 of them in here. And it just goes 1, 2, 3, and I use that for vocals. You can also use it in like a modular rig if you have like an envelope follower to go ahead and like put vocals, or to use your vocals to like modulate an envelope. Domesticatrix, like that's kind of the whole point of the project, is conveying emotions through music, sound, noise, and being able to kind of express that in a way that shares it both with the audience and also just allows me to experience it. And I think that like a big part of like those really Velcro-y, grippy synths that are being like insanely modulated, that's where I get a lot of just like what kind of sounds and textures do I want to feel, and like what sort of, it's kind of like almost like in a sensory seeking way. Like you have to like find the texture that your brain wants to hear. And a lot of those textures are achieved using this rig. So as far as like artists that have influenced both my gear and my sound, I would say definitely 9 Inch Nails, Crystal Castles, Trent Reznor's soundtrack career, Nasenbluten. I would also say, like, for a large part of it, like bands like Big Black, anything that Steve Albini's ever touched. Brainiac. I love Brainiac. Brainiac is, in my opinion, like truly like what noise rock should be. And really like anyone who was on Touch and Go Records back in the 80s and 90s, like you really have a lot of really good sound that may not be necessarily like an electro, industrial, or like punk sound. Because like for me, that's where you get to like KMFDM and like stuff like Nitzer Ebb, like stuff that like is full on, this is dance club music, but there's still that like throbbing gristle, like jazz funk great style, like industrial edge. If I had to pick like a favorite throbbing gristle record, it would be Third Annual Report for sure. With Crystal Castles 2. With 9 Inch Nails, I would say either Broken or The Downward Spiral. Nasenbluten, I would say like 100% No Soul. But there's like a lot of bands that influence me, and like it's even my friends' bands. Like I'm influenced heavily by like the Pittsburgh noise scene, the Philadelphia noise scene, all sorts of noise scenes that exist within the country where people can make music and make noise and make art in the way that they want to without genre constraints and without the constraints of having something that's marketable. Play a set with anyone living or deceased, who would it be? Honestly, I'm gonna go with Trent Reznor. I love the man, and big influence, and yeah, Trent Reznor for sure. The way that my rig is kind of moved over time, I started out with like a smaller box. I wasn't originally using the Pelicans, and I was using like a just like an all-in-one vocal processor, and then feeding like a Digitech Jam Man into it for like my backing tracks and everything. And I got really bored of that really fast. And so I then kind of moved to, hey, let me just run Reaper live. And I've gotten it stable enough by running enough low CPU intensity VSTs and kind of keeping that machine as like a dedicated Reaper machine, to where I'd never really have any reliability issues out of it. Although I do usually carry like an SP404 with me, just in case, usually an SP404A. But I've also used the X version, which is similar. It just doesn't have the TR9 or TR8 S compatibility. So really good unit. I would say like what I would recommend to people trying to get into noise and getting into industrial is it really doesn't matter how cheap your gear is. What matters is your systems, your processes, your ability to move and conduct yourself over time, and being able to perform. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what kind of gear you're using as long as you're performing. And being able to take any kind of gear, whether or not that's a $25, $30 knockoff pedal, or, a $300, $400, fully modular synth, and you can make what sounds you want. But it's important to find what sounds you want, what kind of music you want to make, or even if you want to make music. It's kind of one of those things of, if you want to make noise, just go for it. Like, no one's stopping you. Like, the minimum to make noise is like, a contact microphone, a distortion pedal, and a DI box. Like, there's so much that you can do with such little equipment and really just bear the full spread of human emotion sonically. It's artists like Yazret Shadim from Pittsburgh and like Necroviolence from Wisconsin that like really, to me, said, hey, you can do noise, you can do industrial, you can do dance, and it's all part of the same kind of ball of subgenre.
Generation. It's gonna be Woodstock for the 80s.